All right, so did you know that Van Gogh is actually pronounced Van Gogh? Yeah, it totally sounds like a cough. Van Gogh was a self-taught artist. So just like myself and probably many of you out there, he taught himself how to paint. I think that's crazy. Even crazier is that he didn't start painting until the last 10 years of his life. Yeah, he did all of those paintings in the last 10 years of his life. And if you figured out that he had painted 900 paintings and did the math, it would come out to be that he was doing a painting every 36 hours. Now that's devotion. All right, so this is one of the favorite facts that makes me giggle every time. I mean, it probably shouldn't be giggling, but Vincent van Gogh is actually the oldest child of 6, but he was not the firstborn. On exactly the same day, 1 year earlier, his parents gave birth to a stillborn son that they also named Vincent. Yeah, that meant that Vincent was walking around town with his name and his birth date on a tombstone that was actually his brother's headstone. Totally creepy. All right, so Van Gogh, believe it or not, only sold one painting during his lifetime, and this was the painting, The Red Vineyard. It's not even one of them that you would say is his most powerful paintings. And it only sold for 400 francs, and it sold in Belgium, and it was sold just a few months before he died. And if you convert it today, 400 francs is about $5,000 in today's economy. I mean, still a lot of money, but the fact that they go for millions today kind of puts in perspective how little he was regarded in his time. He was masterful with his use of complementary colors. And actually, this is going to be one of the webinar lessons that I'm going to translate for you. His use of complementary color is something I have honed in on in my own work. So let's say red and green, opposites on the color wheel. When you start to look at his body of work, you can see that he almost infuses complementary colors in everything that he does. Even right down to the fact that there's like a purple stool over there and that the other predominant color in that bar pool table scene is yellow. Again, complementary colors just like the green and red. Blue and orange, which is probably what he's most famous for, but again, masterful. And that's the power, the energy. When you start working with complementary colors, it is the energy that is infused into the art piece that actually makes it resonate. And here's another little tidbit. At the time, all of the artists that were famous and selling, they were artists that were using these really dull, dark colors. And all of a sudden, Van Gogh comes in with these strong, bold brush marks and these bright colors, and they were like, this guy is totally not legit. He doesn't know what he's doing. And, you know, in his own time, he wasn't revered, but he totally modernized art today. And lastly, purple and yellow. And I think these are almost the most powerful. You know, yellow is so bright. So using those colors together, they almost bounce and vibrate off of each other. He was totally a master. One of my favorite little tidbits. So Van Gogh, as many people know, was addicted to drinking absinthe. This is like this bright green, like Everclear. It's like this absolutely 100 and something proof liquor. And it caused people to go crazy. But many people don't know he used to also drink turpentine and eat paint. Yes. So the story behind him eating paint, and it's a fairly well-known fact that he drank turpentine and ate paint. The story is that he was supposedly thinking that by consuming it, since he was so depressed all the time, that his insides would be just as bright and yellow as his paintings, and therefore making him happy. However, as we know, this didn't bring him happiness at all. It actually made him sicker and kind of ended up making him suicidal in the end because of all the toxins, mostly lead, in the paints. All right, so over the course of 10 years, Van Gogh created more than 43 self-portraits. Now, these are comprised of paintings and drawings, but the reason why he was doing that is he was totally poor. He lived off of his brother, his younger brother, Theo's allowance. So Theo paid for everything for him. So he couldn't afford to get live models to sit for him. So he ended up painting himself by looking in the mirror. And this is how Van Gogh used portrait painting as a way to develop his skills as an artist. Now that becomes our second lesson for Van Gogh. So when you register for the class, you will get access to that second lesson where I use myself to paint a self-portrait and show you how I develop all of those features into my journal. All right, now here's really something to think about. If Van Gogh is painting himself in a mirror, right, his portraits are depicting his face as it appears as he's looking in the mirror. So it's in reverse, right? So his right side of the image is actually the left side of his face. Now that might, yeah, whatever, you might think that. However, think about Van Gogh's self-portrait of him with his bandaged ear. That was painted just weeks after he had cut off a portion of his ear. And his right ear in the portrait is bandaged. However, in reality, he had cut off his left ear. So again, if you don't realize he's painting himself in a mirror, you might miss that fact. All right. This one's a pretty awesome piece. So this is called Self-Portrait Without Beard, and it's actually the only painting Van Gogh ever painted of himself without his beard. And in 1998, this sold to a private collector, and I believe it was at Sotheby's, for a cost of $71.5 million. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, and we could all hope one day to paint a painting that sold for that much. Now, I didn't find out actually how big this painting is, but I'm pretty sure it's not big enough to warrant $71.5 million. However, the old saying goes, a painting is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And good on this guy for putting it in his private collection. All right, so that was fun. So that's why I wanted to introduce you to a little bit of the art history. And you start looking at his art, you start to understand it more. And that's all fun and games, but why not give you a little free painting lesson that's included in this webinar? So go ahead, get your paints ready, and I want to welcome you to the first lesson on Van Gogh. All right, so for complementary colors, I decided to keep my design simple because really what I want to do is get the paint in my hands and kind of understand the interaction. So I'm going to be doing a couple things with that paint. I'm going to be making sure I'm using value. So when I say value, I mean the lightness of that color. So if you had black, then you would be, your variations of gray going down would be the value scale. So if I'm using blue and yellow, then I'll be making sure I have a really dark blue and a really light blue to play on all that too. So I'm just thinking I'm gonna do a floral. I have a super messy palette, so don't think this is going to be anything spectacular. But I thought, why not just get a yellow and blue palette, since I love Starry Night and I love those colors together, and just start designing. So I'm thinking I'm gonna do yellow flowers and a blue background. I'm going to change up the vase maybe by adding in a neutral color so that it's not really a color at all, so it's not playing against that. But I also want to make sure I'm painting really loose and flowy. So I'm going to use a little bit bigger brush than I was using in the last assignment. I'm going to be using, let's see if I can get the larger brush. I'm going to be using, this one is a size 8, so it's got a little bit larger head to it. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to use a lot of paint. I might be using a retarder as I'm going through, but I want to just get this on fast because I want to get some blends. So just a really sketchy outline first, just to go ahead in. And, you know, let's kind of play with some sunflowers, since that's what he did, you know, we're kind of studying that. So let's get that kind of shape, and maybe there's another little shape, and maybe there's a half shape. So really loosely just getting in this sunflower design. I want some to be bigger, some to be smaller, and just kind of putting that in there. It doesn't really matter what I create at this point because I know I'm just playing around with color. So loose design of flowers, and I'm just going to take this kind of teal in here and put in a vase and just kind of get, you know, some kind of loose vase in there. Nothing fancy. And then maybe just a horizon line. So all I'm sketching in, I'm using color. I don't really care what I'm making, so I want to encourage you to do this. But you could even do something as simple as a square with the opposite complementary color around the outside and just understand from there. Or you could do all the colors. The yellow and purple, the blue and orange, and the red and green, and just see how they react and vibrate off of each other. All right, so let me go in with a darker kind of orangish yellow. They kind of ride the same colorway, so I'm just making sure my yellow is a bit darker here. So I'm just going to go through, add some of that in there, and I'm going to work in layers. And I'm being super sloppy because that's what I want. I want to get the most bang from my time in here. So I'm just making super sloppy flowers, and now I'm going to add some of that. I know that when I'm making sunflowers, they have dark centers. And maybe I'll take a little blue and a little purple and just mix up a dark blue. Again, they're similar colors. I'm just darkening it. And maybe I'll just do that in the centers. Now you could totally make these realistic and go with a brown. Wherever these touch the orange might even be brown. Kind of liking that. And now I'm just going to capitalize on that dark color there and put some yellow around it. I might need to get more paint. But that's what I'm doing. I just want to make sure that you understand what I'm doing as I go in here. I'll probably have to go get my palette full of a little bit more color. I'll be right back. I'm back. I just put a little bit more yellow onto my palette. I could wait for these to dry, but I really like to work wet and wet. So I'm just going to make a hot mess and kind of shape it up. It's just fun. So if you're wondering like, oh, Donna, what are you doing? I'm just having fun. So I'm going to be mixing a little bit of, this is I think cobalt blue, light ultramarine blue. I'm just making a new blue color. And I like to go back and forth on my paintings. Meaning I do the background and the foreground. And I'm just going to be creating just a background that's blue. Different values of that blue, different shades of blue cut into my flowers. And I consider this like a mapping layer. I go ahead in and map in what's going to be blue in this case, what's going to be yellow, and then I come back out and refine. Moving that wall down a little bit. All right. And this is a hot mess. I'm going for hot mess. It's fun to paint loose, especially in a journal. This isn't a canvas that's going on the wall. This is where you practice. This is where you have fun. This is where you take risks. All right, so I'm just going to go in. I was telling you I want to make a neutral. So this is kind of a light blue. I'll put a little green in there, which is a really washed out. Looks like a gray. I'm just going to make the table that this sunflower arrangement is sitting on. Down here. Again, this is that color mapping stage. So I'm not really too worried about what I'm making. And now I'm going to take a little bit of that blue and a little bit of that yellow. That'll make a brown because they're opposites. And I'm going to add a little bit of white and see if I can't make, ooh, it's a little bit matching the table, so I might change some things up, but for right now, that helps me distinguish it. Might need a little bit more blue in that, just to give me some more. All right, so this is what I call the mapping layer. It's messy, it's awesome. I'm gonna now go in and refine this. And here's my other little secret. I find when I do this messy mapping layer, whether it's in oil or acrylic or watercolor. What this does is now I know what I'm painting. I figured out my composition. I know where I'm going. I'm gonna let this dry and then I'm gonna put another layer on top and refine it. But just in starting, I can tell that this has a little bit of neon like brightness to it, with that bright yellowish orange playing against the dull colors of the background and the dark colors of the center. So I'm gonna let this dry, I'm gonna come back and then we'll paint another layer on top of this, just playing with the complementary colors. You know me, I'm impatient, so I couldn't let it dry all the way. But I'm gonna go now in and try to use some of this yellow because I wanna pop things out. So what really cool that happened all on its own organically is that there's some yellow down here, which is leading me to say, oh, the light must be coming from this side. At least that's what I'm going with. So I'm just gonna make sure that these flowers that are facing that side, ooh, that's kind of cool, are getting some light on them. And I'm picking up color accidentally, but I'm kind of liking what's happening, so I'm gonna go for it. And if you're really tight in using your brush, then take your brush and make it bigger. So that's what I'm doing here. Since it's not dry, it's kind of blending into everything. Now here's also a little misnomer. If you took your paintbrush and you dip it into white, you think, oh, it's gonna make my color brighter. It actually makes your color more dull. So be careful of that, but you can even see just those little touches of that light color are now resonating light and, you know, countering the weight of what we're seeing here, because the light colors will come forward and the dark colors will recede. All right, so this is still wet and I'm playing around with it, but I'm thinking I'm gonna play with the background here. I've got light ultramarine blue, which is obviously ultramarine blue with a little white in it. And I'm just mixing it with ultramarine blue here. And I'm gonna just refine that. I think maybe I'll even make it lighter. I'm just playing around here, mixing some colors. I'm not sure I'm loving that, so I'm just kind of moving my brush around. I'll figure it out when I get there. I love that. Whatever that was right there with that dark ultramarine blue. And it doesn't matter what colors you're using, to be honest. Don't freak out of like you need specific colors. This is just any blue and yellow, orangish, and just kind of play around with it. And I'm thinking if I'm gonna do the background dark, I might wanna do those insides, some of the insides of the flowers. And I'm being super messy. That's how I like to paint. Big gobs of paint, and that's kind of really how Van Gogh painted with his nice impasto style. Clean that off. And I'll probably have to dry in between my layers because I am working so thick, but I'm thinking, well, light's gonna, oh yeah, see that? That's instant light. And all I'm doing is working in a journal. I'm not committing to a big masterpiece. I'm learning. I'm playing. This should be fun. I want you to have fun while you're doing this. I want you to explore. I want you to take risks, which is really what art is all about. Just taking risks. You never know that if you're going to take a risk that might alter the course of your art, which is kind of exciting, I think. I think the more risks you take, the more fun you have, the bigger and bolder your art will become. So I have this teal kind of around here. I can make the vase teal. Why don't I just make the vase teal? It's still in the blue family. So I'm gonna call it love. And I haven't really cleaned my brush, and you'll see I'm picking up some yellows. Again, I'm being super sloppy. And one of the ways I can make that teal darker is to add a little bit of that ultramarine blue into the teal. And all of a sudden now I'm creating a shadow on this side, which is just fun. I can take a shadow underneath here. It's all fun. I can get a little water on my brush and I can make a little shadow here. And I can go into some white because I'd already made this a light color. And I can add some more of the white over here since the light is coming this way. Again, super sloppy. It's fun. I almost feel like Bob Ross and like make happy little trees, but I do mean that. I do mean just get loose. I find that most people that are painting or just starting out painting, they put so much pressure on themselves to be like this amazing painter. And you know, if you don't take risks and practice and learn, you can't fix the mistakes you make. And that's really what I want you to be able to do through this process of learning, is to be able to fix mistakes that you might make. Because we mostly stop. We stop way too soon and we say, what if I mess it up? It's not about messing it up. It's about working through knowing how to fix it if you do. Because if you don't take the risks, you're never going to get there. I'm loving this, by the way. This is a big old brush doing this. I'm going to go in. I want to make some more lighter yellow. I have taken some white into my yellow because I really need to get a different color. And I'm okay with a little dull. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that. And you can see it's a little bit less. Also be careful of the donut. I speak to this in a lot of my floral painting workshops, that people tend to make donuts when they make flowers. If you make a donut, it'll look like a donut. So if you look, I'm making angular so that it looks like light would reflect like that. It's just giving it a little bit more interest. I don't know if I can express to you enough at how much I love this right now. I'm in love with that. It's a hot mess, but let's see what we're doing here. We're creating light, we're creating intensity. I feel like just even with the background the way it is, it has such a nice intensity to it. Again, this is using the complementary color palette. Now, I really don't like purple and yellow. So I wouldn't necessarily go to blue and yellow, which has a little bit of the orange in it. And, you know, they're neighbors. So, you know, take this for what it's worth. Be literal or not as literal as you'd like. And the only thing I just want to point out is I'm telling you the light sources over here, so these would be darker back this way. So I just want to make sure that some of them are lighter in the front or the lightest area. And I'm loving the blend. That's making me happy. I'm loving the depth that I'm getting. I might take just a little bit of the yellow. I'm trying to make those a little brighter, but they're not as bright as the white. Oh, that's nice. And I'm even thinking, what would happen if I mixed a little bit of the teal in with all of this to make a new color in here? Oh, do you feel that? Had a moment. Had a moment. Moment. I like moments. Yeah. So, I'm going to walk away from this. I'm going to consider it done. So what I want you to do in these complementary color lessons is to get a journal page, work on a canvas, whatever you feel comfortable with. And I want you to get complementary colors, red and green, blue and orange, purple and yellow. And I just want you to play, because sometimes what you're missing in your work, which is not giving it the life that you really want, is your knowledge of color and your use of color. Now this might be too loose for some of you, but for me, I've had to practice staying this loose. I have this natural tendency to want to overwork. So for me, this is a happy place when I can walk away from my painting, especially like I said, this is a practice. And I feel like it's super loose, but I've gotten the intensity to it. So voila, there you go. Using your complementary colors, and like I said, do more than one of these. If you have felt unsuccessful, we'll do it again. If you have felt successful, well then do it with another color palette.